Hi, this is Shelly with the Family Recovery Conference, and I'm excited to be here today with Morgan Garon, who is a financial recovery counselor. And I'm going to let her introduce herself, and you can tell everybody a little bit about what you do, and then we'll ask some questions. How's that?
Excellent. Sounds good. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me, Shelly. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be part of your project. And before we get started, I just really want to acknowledge you for everything that you've done and put into this. For everybody who's watching, Shelly and I work together. I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do. But thank you. Thank you for your heart, your commitment, your integrity, and everything that you've done to put this together to touch so many lives in such a powerful way. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And thank you, everybody who's joining us. It's really an honor to be part of this project. As Shelly said, I'm a financial recovery counselor and a wealth empowerment coach. So what that means is I work with people to really help them transform their lives around the area of finance. And we find that addiction has a huge impact on money and finance and fiscal matters for not only the individual, but also the families. And Shelly, I think you can probably speak to that. That's pretty much how we got connected.
Yes, it is how we got connected, because a lot of the way that you're running in your life under pressure and a little bit of chaos and fear can translate into different areas of your life, your health, your money, your relationships. And our financial picture took a big hit when we were taking care of such a big medical expense, treatment and recovery for our family members. So I reached out to you to really get grounded and put practices in place that would help our family operate at a balance level, because everything had been in just complete, fight or flight syndrome, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But will you tell everybody a little bit about how financial recovery came about? Because there is a tie-in between addiction and the financial recovery program.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm certified in the process of financial recovery through the Financial Recovery Institute, which is run by a woman by the name of Karen McCall. And this is a process that she created going back as far as the 80s, where she was living this very high-powered lifestyle in San Francisco, working in the financial district, she likes to say, driving her little red sports car in her power suits with her shoulder pads and all the good trappings of wealth and success of the 80s. But underneath it all, she was experiencing great turmoil in her finances. She was pretty much broke and living in complete denial around it, and struggling with her own addictions. And the birth of the process came through her sobriety. So it's a process of going through your finances and really starting from square one, really getting back to basics and looking at all the moving pieces of your money and kind of dusting them off and reassembling them in a more empowering way. So I know that might sound a little vague because it's different for everyone, but it really is bringing a level of sobriety to your finances that is based in awareness and intention, and really just being fully aware of everything that's going on and really trying to move forward in a more empowered sense. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So what is a financial recovery counselor?
A financial recovery counselor is somebody who would take you through this process. So money has so much energy attached to it. And if you've got a lot of negative feelings, negative thoughts, negative habits around money's going to kind of carry that flavor. Every time you think about it, touch it, interact with it, it's going to kind of pick that up. And like you said, through addiction, there can be so many ups and downs, and there's a lot tied to our finances that unfolds when you're going through healing and recovery. So a financial recovery counselor is somebody who would take you through this process on your finances to really be able to dig into these deeper areas around money, and help you just kind of shine the light in there and see what's going on. There's so many topics that never get touched on around money. It's something that's really not taught a lot in schools. It may or may not be discussed openly at home. In society, we kind of are taught to keep our money matters to ourselves a little bit. So a counselor in this area is somebody who would be your partner in really navigating these waters and figuring out, okay, where are you? Where do you want to be? What's been going on? How do we reassemble this in a more empowering way?
And what kind of impact do you think addiction has on your finances?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, it's all over the board, right?
Right.
Because it could be the impact in just how much you're spending. How much are you spending on alcohol, drugs, substances, whatever, you know, in any form, whatever your addiction is grounded in, it's the money to simply fund that. And then also the aftermath that comes from that of the lack of awareness and kind of the scrambling. I always say it's like scrambled eggs, right? So it's kind of just like putting out these different fires that come up in front of you, you know, and the ups and downs of that. And maybe there's been impact around how much debt you've accumulated because of this. And that can either be, you know, in debt that's been accumulated going through treatment, or just because things have been so scattered. It might also be the lack of savings. Maybe you haven't really been able to save at the level that you want. Maybe it's impacted your earnings. You know, sometimes you lose a job when this stuff is going on. Family members too, because there's so much chaos to process, and there's so much going on that sometimes like your earning potential is decreased. And then, you know, there's also aspects as far as like maybe some codependency or enabling that can be going on, which often is done inside of finance or financial control, things like that. So there's lots of different areas where this can kind of be sprouting up that maybe it's not even obvious, even though some of them may be very obvious, you know, the financial impact.
Right.
So it can be really, it's like an octopus. It's just got its little tentacles and everything, you know, so it can be all over the place.
And it's, you know, it's foundational, you know, in a way of taking care of yourself. You know, to take care of yourself, you have to have a certain amount of money, and you may not really even realize how much money that is. And then when you're in that cycle of spending or you're in a state of emergency, you're not really responding in a way that might be you might be responding in a way that's impacting your money negatively. But you're in such a state of emergency, it's hard to recover without some guidance and some help. So what do you think is possible through the transformation of your finances?
Oh, well, that's my favorite thing. There's so much that's possible. And really that's what I do is I help people define what it is that's truly important to them and then help bring that to life. Because when you're on top of your finances, you really can get on top of anything because of that energy that's behind it. So I really feel that, you know, I feel that I work in transformation, and money is the language that I use to do that. So we're often counting dollars and organizing a spending plan and figuring out how to pay down debt and all of that. But what I'm really out to create with people is that deeper level of fulfillment, that greater level of satisfaction, and really giving people permission to dream again, and then a path to get to those dreams. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's usually kind of, you know, there's some time involved in a lot of this stuff. But what I think most people find is that it really can happen faster than they think when they've got a roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this process, or with working on your finances, it's like it gets momentum. And that momentum can lead to things that you could never even have imagined initially. in the beginning. So the possibilities, quite frankly, are limitless. And the growth that I see my clients go through is spectacular, because what we start out working on day one is often a whole nother ballgame than what we're working on at year one, because there's been so much progress made that it just keeps blooming and blooming and blooming. So, I mean, there's a lot of power inside of it, and the possibilities are whatever you can honestly think of for yourself. And I mean that sincerely. I know sometimes that sounds like woo woo, or like, yeah, right, how could I do that? But there's a path, and it works, and it's amazing. So there's a lot of possibility.
Well, I think just using the practices, like when you get into the practice and the rhythm and of something, that starts to shift, like the neural patterns in your brain, the way that you relate to things, and that happens in recovery too. You get these new practices, and then you start getting in a rhythm, and then you get physically healthy, then you get emotionally healthy. And one of the reasons I came to you is I was like, I want to be like, we're sober in all these places. What's financial sobriety? You're like, how does that work? And how could we shift this for our family so it doesn't feel like we're in a state of emergency? When you really put it into the categories and you really looked at it, we really weren't in a state of emergency, but we had been living in a state of emergency.
Right.
In everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what has financial sobriety meant to you then, I guess? Let me ask you a question.
Oh, that's a good call. That's a good question. I think it was really learning what we really needed, like we knew, like, you have bills, and like this costs this and that costs that. And at the end of the month, there's this much left over. There's not enough, one or the other, right?
Right.
Or there's just enough. But I think the sobriety part is putting a plan in place at the beginning of every month. That was like, okay, this is what it takes to take care of us, and this is how we plan to spend the money. Not, and it never felt like in a kind of deprived way, but more of a way to say, this is how I want to spend my money, And then you started to get a picture of what was really important and what you were really spending your money on. And did you want to spend your money on that? So how am I using my money? Am I using my money as a way to meet a need, like an emotional need? Or am I using the money in a way that feels nourishing and good, So, I mean, you could use shopping for instance, right? So now you're out and you're like, am I buying this because I just want to feel a certain way? Or do I really want this? Is it in my spending plan? No, or yes. And it feels good when like, yeah, I planned for that. Or we planned for this. We planned for this trip and we have this, and we don't have to go into this in a state of emergency, or if we spend this money, it's going to be bad because we won't have enough later. Like that kind of stuff starts to get broken down. The not enough feeling, and the is it worth it feeling.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, guys. That's what I do with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. And I love, I mean, even I can hear it even in your language now, because it's using a different kind of language too, where we don't, as you just mentioned, we don't budget. We make a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Because that you're planning to make this much money. How are you planning to spend it and save it? And that is a completely different context that is so much more empowering than, oh, here's this budget that I just try to apply month after month and it never quite works out. And I feel like I only get to live on the scraps that are left over. Like, no, thank you. Who would ever want to do that? But it's like, okay, well, how much do I plan on having coming in? How do I plan to manage it? And then just beginning to shift right there. That's beautiful. You really summed it up with the not enough feeling, really being able to understand that. And is it worth it?
Yeah.
So
And
that's
you
terrific.
just reminded me that what happens for families, and I speak for myself and probably for a lot of family members, um, and people that, and our loved ones that are impacted, but what happens is you feel like you have no choices. And so I guess financial sobriety to me now means like I got back I have the power of choice. Like I'm not, budget me doesn't feel like I get to choose, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
how it goes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but actually I do. Now I feel more empowered because I choose how much I'm making, I choose how much I'm spending, I choose ahead of time, and in the moment I'm always in choice. So I can say, yes to this and no to that. And if I say yes to this, I might say no to that. But the choice part, because as a family member, you feel like you have no choice in some, like when at some points, it feels more empowering to me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's the idea. Put the choice back in your hands so that you can choose and choose powerfully and know what the impact of those choices is going to be. So having enough clarity to say, this is where I am, because a lot of people are just fumbling around in the dark in these situations. And quite frankly, that's addiction included or not at all. This is also just a problem that the majority of our population is facing is just a certain lack of financial understanding in their own lives. It just so happens, obviously, that it's magnified in situations around addiction. But I find this across the board. I don't just work with people in this arena. I've got a lot of sober clients, but I also have people who aren't necessarily involved in that world and they're still experiencing this. So I don't want this to seem like, oh, this is, another area that you have to fix or something like that. This is just meant to be empowering across the board. And it really is about putting that choice back in your hands, having the clarity to know, okay, here's why I'm making that choice and here's what I can expect as a result of that. So really being able to see the impact, and then knowing like, okay, well, this is where I can expect to be if I do these things with my money.
Yeah.
So it's just a completely different context and conversation around money that, quite frankly, I think is just missing across all aspects of our society, honestly.
Yeah. Choose and choose powerfully was my favorite thing that you've said to me this whole time that we've been working together.
It's one of my favorites that had a big impact on me. And it obviously resonates with a lot of people. And it's something great to come back to because it does help you remember that you really do have that ability for yourself. So, yeah.
So what do you think most people struggle with when it comes to money?
Well, just exactly what we're talking about here, just lack of clarity. And what I mean by that is they just don't necessarily know. They don't know the true cost of living for themselves. They usually know like, okay, obviously the rent or the mortgage, the car payment, the cell phone bill, the credit card bills, whatever, the bills, and then, all right, groceries, gas. But there are so many things that transpire over the course of a month that are so easy to forget about. It's the haircut. It's something last minute that one of the kiddos needed for school. It was my dog just he was running around in the bushes, scraped his eye and got an eye infection $150 later. It's all sorts of things like that. And then also the things that come up that are outside of our month to month. So vehicle registration, back to school shopping expenses, people who are self-employed, they struggle sometimes with quarterly payments because they don't know how much everything actually adds up to be. Mm-hmm. And so you and I have discussed that of how shocking it can be to be like, oh my gosh, look how much it actually costs to live. And I don't think that that's necessarily surprising because I think that's where, a lot of people are like, well, yeah, no kidding. That's why it's never enough, or that's why it never feels like enough. Mm-hmm. But people very, very rarely have a strong hold on what they're really spending. And it's kind of just this like fumbling around in the dark, like I said, where they're just kind of reacting to whatever's coming at them. And I work with really intelligent people, and they always are like, what is wrong with me? I'm doing so well in all these other areas of my life. Why can't I get this area under control? And so I just see people struggling with the how-to of it because they don't know where to begin, because they don't have enough information in front of themselves. They just don't really know what's going on.
And you offer practical solutions and tools. So there's a practical part of it. And then there's some deconstructing of your mindset around money, and money beliefs and things that you may be carrying with you your whole life that are impacting your relationship with money.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's this two-pronged approach where, it's very logical approach with the numbers and just like, okay, can we make it all add up? And then in doing all of that, there's always a lot that comes to the surface. Sometimes people are really stressed out or scared, or maybe they're really happy about something that happened around their money. There's always a lot of emotions tied to it. So I always say we take the numbers and then we look underneath them.
Yeah.
And we've got to gather all those numbers up first to see like, okay, what's going on? And then there's lots that comes up inside of that. So there's always all sorts of things. And that's the whole money mindset. Maybe you hear a lot about money mindset and manifesting and all of these buzzwords. But really it just boils down to like, what do you think and how do you feel about money? That's really what that is for those who maybe kind of are like, well, what's that even mean? It's just like, what are those thoughts that come to your mind when you think about your money? Do you get nervous and scared and stressed out? Are you excited and happy and like feeling empowered? That's the mindset underneath. And that's what we work on improving by gathering up these practical, logical items that really we get organized, and then it continues to unfold from there. So it is very much this two-pronged approach.
If someone wanted to get started today on their finances, what's one thing they could do to help their finances?
Okay. So number one thing I tell everybody to do is start tracking your spending. And what I mean by that is it can be in a notebook. You can write it down in a notebook, or you could put it on an Excel spreadsheet, or if you have some sort of, I don't even like to say the word budgeting tool, but if you have some sort of budgeting tool.
Some sort of tracking tool.
Yeah, some sort of tracking tool. Some people use I use MoneyMinder online. That's the tool that I use with all of my clients. I absolutely love it. It gives you that clarity. But there's things like YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget. There's mint.com, there's QuickBooks, there's all sorts of things out there. So whatever you have to start tracking your money in real time, because what you're going to start to notice is, where's it going? How much did you spend? In your mind, but your mind can't keep a running tally, and then it just gets muddy. So the most simple thing I can tell people to do is start tracking it. And quite frankly, when I start working with people, I probably did it with you, right? Where we actually started just writing it down in a notebook. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the problems that we run into in this day and age are that things are so simplified with technology that it's actually complicated them. And it's one of those things where it's like, it makes it easier, but there's more of a disconnect too. So sometimes just writing down in a notebook what's been going on, what's coming in, what's going out, what have you been spending your money on, it just starts to bring a level of awareness that maybe hasn't been there for a while. So that's usually the one thing that I'll say. And then you can start making choices from there when you start seeing, oh my gosh, look how much eating out is adding up to be, or look how much my beer budget is adding up to be, or whatever. Oh my goodness, I keep overspending on the kids again, whatever. Mm-hmm. Then it just starts to put you in that position of where you can make a choice. Gosh, you know what? Maybe this week I'm going to spend $20 less in that area. whatever. And you start small with little steps like that, but you just start somewhere so that you can start building that awareness. That's where I start with everybody.
Tracking, the number one thing.
Tracking, number one thing you can do.
And what about if someone's like, I cannot even start doing anything like this ever?
Well, I encourage you to fight past the fear, fight past the discomfort. Sometimes that resistance, it's just, we're so used to it. We're so used to living sometimes inside of these constraints that have been created or that we've created ourselves. And so honestly, writing stuff down in a notebook, you really can. And once you take that first step, little doors start to open along the way, little path opens up over here. Before you know it, you can start moving forward. And I'll tell you what, as scary and as hard as it can be to face the music and face the numbers, it's a lot less scary than where you end up when you don't look at it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And time again, I have my clients say, oh my gosh, I already feel better just by looking at it. Nothing's even happened yet. We have not even really been able to take action. We haven't been able to change anything or transform anything, but they're just like, oh my gosh, I can take a breath because at least it's all out in the open. So if you're listening and you're scared and you don't know where to get started, I just encourage you that first step. That's how it starts with anything. It's that first step. And I encourage you that you can. I've taken a lot of people through the process. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do for yourself out there to just get that ball rolling.
Are there other kinds of resources out there that you would recommend, or ways to kind of start to dig into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I do what I do. There's a small network of us who do this type of work, and I am available. So of course, there's always something like that. You can visit Financial Recovery Institute, it's just financialrecovery.com. And there's a list of counselors who do what I do. You can find me on that list. You can connect with me there. There's also the Financial Recovery book by Karen McCall. If you just wanted to start there and kind of start to scratch the surface, maybe you're not totally ready to jump in. Maybe there are some financial constraints. But actually, look, it lives on my desk. It's right here. It's backwards, I know. But this is the book that started it all for me. Shelly, you've got a copy, I know.
Yeah.
So that's a great place to begin, because it opens up the conversation around this area and starts to give you an idea of what might be possible for you if you were to go down this path and work on this area. And then there's also 12-step for under earners anonymous. There's debtors anonymous. And then I often find that codependent anonymous, CODA, that's applicable sometimes too, because of patterns and habits that develop inside the family when dealing with addiction. So there's those resources, and a lot of those groups meet on the phone. So regardless of where you are, you could always start there and just start getting in the conversation. So there's tons of stuff out there. And like I said, I'm available. This is what I do. I love what I do. And there's lots of resources. So please dig in, do something for yourselves. It's so empowering to get on top of this area of your life. And it really can be different, even for people who think, not for me. It really, really can be different.
And it really is something that you might not think you need. Like, some people are like, I don't need therapy, or I don't need to work out, or I'm just going to eat junk food, but then when you start doing it and you start to feel it in your body, in your mind, it's really, it's empowering, and it's something that we aren't given these tools right out of the gate. So I would say, maybe it's just me, but I would say most people are managing their money just intuitively, maybe, or just like, it comes in, it goes out. It comes in, it goes out.
Totally.
without paying
That's
a
what
lot
I'm
of
saying.
attention to it.
Just in a very reactive manner.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here's a bill. I need to pay it. Oh, we need this. Oh, we need that. And you're right. I mean, some people aren't necessarily in pain around it. And if it's working for you, great. But I know I was in that position at one point. I've been all over the place with this. Like I tell everybody, everything I teach, I've been through myself, like ups and downs with it. And so I've struggled at the very bottom. I've excelled at the top. I've been everywhere in between. And every step of the way, that awareness, until I went through this process, got my certification, started my own practice, before I was aware of this specific process, I did all the same stuff too. I was like, oh, I'm fine. Like I make enough money, but was very reactive and missed out on so many opportunities. Really, really, really sold myself short. So even though I wasn't in pain around it, I was selling myself immensely short. Then there were other areas where I was in pain and it wasn't working, and I was stuck in that credit card cycle and overspending and under-earning and really just like floundering around. And obviously it would have been useful there, but it's really a process that's useful across the board. Many of my clients make great money, but they're just like, I don't even know what to do. And then there's people who are struggling, of course, as well. But I find the common theme is one of the number one things people say to me is, I just feel like I should know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, why can't I do this? I should know how to do this. And that's such a funny concept to me, because I try to compare it to something like, well, that's saying like, you should just be able to speak French.
Right.
I really just expect you to just be able to speak 3 or 4 languages, and I'm not sure why you can't, even though you've never taken any classes. It's not something that's ever been given to you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's a skill. Money is a skill. Money management is a skill. It's a language. It takes time to develop, and it's not something that's readily available. So unless you have this natural curiosity, which I happen to have, it just happened to be the area that I got fascinated with. So did my own work to learn it. Mm-hmm. Unless that's you, you're not necessarily going to know how to do it. And there's a lot of shame attached to it, because for some reason we've received this messaging that you should just know how to do this.
Yeah.
So, for a lot of people, it's just like scratching the surface and being like, okay, where do I even begin? And then, like I said, it's surprising sometimes how quickly you can take off once you learn the skill. It's a skill, and then you have to practice it. And guess what? You're not going to do it right sometimes, but it's a skill, and you practice it and it gets better and better. And I find that when I share that with people, they're usually relieved. They're like, whew, okay.
Yeah.
Whew, it's not just me, like, okay, this isn't about me, it's something that I can learn. So I'd say that's a big takeaway for people too, is like, oh, okay, I can learn this.
True story. So you can reach Morgan at morgangaron.com, and Morgan is our financial recovery counselor for the Family Recovery Conference, and we appreciate you being part of this today, and we look forward to working together some more.
Thank you. It is absolutely my honor, my privilege, and I appreciate you and everyone who's listening. Thanks for taking the time. I wish you wellness in every area of your life.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.